I also really wanted to make it a concept album. There's a lot of components of it that I thought about when I was writing this album. From the story, which is this traveler that's traveling through space, leaves Earth, leaves everything he knows, is by himself, goes and explores all these different worlds. The different worlds are symbolized by the different songs throughout the album. The beginning of the album is symbolized blast off, a whiplash of leaving, getting blasted off into space. And then the end of the album is about returning home and that reconnection. But also the end of the album is a lot more mellow. There's a lot more melody. And that's because it is that coming back. It's getting back to yourself. It's coming back home. The beginning is all the chaos, right? It's all the chaos. And the middle is, I get a little bit deeper with some of the concepts and some of the sounds. And that's just the introspective part of the story. Even the way that I laid out the songs and the intensity of the songs was thought through in terms of the story and the naming structure. It's all to do with where you are in that journey.
Welcome to another episode of A Path Unfolding. My guest today is Defunk, aka Logan Anderson. Man, it is so good to have you here today, brother. I've been jamming your new record, The Voyage, and I am just so excited to have you, man. We have known each other for a good long while. You are managed by Pivotal Agency. A good friend of mine, Cole Jones, and I founded that together. And I remember the day when we were actually in Denver and Closey was about to open up for Bass Nectar, and he was having a conversation with you. And I was so excited that he was going to potentially sign you as a client. So welcome to the
Awesome.
podcast.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. Really excited to talk to you. And yeah, it's been a trip for sure. It's been a
Man.
while since we've known each other.
It is a long and strange journey, man. Yeah. We had you down. I think one of the last times I got to saw you play proper it was a Closey show. You opened up as
Yes.
direct support. We had Baseline
Yeah,
Drift there.
I remember that.
Man, yeah. And I remember telling Cole, like when he was asking me a little bit about you and like you guys were wanting to potentially work together. And I was like, man, I have been playing his tunes in my DJ sets for a long time. So props to
Awesome.
you, man. You make some really fun, energetic, but still very classy and like, it's never cheesy. Like you make me dance, like you make me move. So props on
I
that.
appreciate
Props on
that.
the new album. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I was just gonna add something there, just with the cheesiness. I mean, I have definitely strayed into Britney Spears mashups and some interesting things that I think probably pushed the whole cheesy bit. But I appreciate that. I think hopefully I've done it all tastefully along the way in terms of the remixes and the mashups and stuff. So
Absolutely. I can hear so much influence from Daft Punk and all of that era of music. I think this new album, you really broke some like great new ground, all sorts of different BPMs and tempos. Definitely stretched your musical range and what you brought to the table there. But I did want to take it back. What were some of your early days like? How did you really decide to jump into music full force and become the artist that you are today?
it all started in high school. The same stories. A lot of producers probably just really excited about music, probably in a band. I was in a metal band for many years through high school. The band never really went anywhere, but I kept having this drive to write and create. And I was a full on metalhead, but I also listened to a lot of electronic music that I was starting to get into kind of around the 2009, 2010 era. Some of the earlier ones, people like Aphex Twin, Pendulum, Prodigy, Diesel Boys, Skinny Puppy. So like a lot of kind of industrial, there was a lot of carryover from metal and a lot of experimental, kind of darker, grittier kind of music. And that's where I started. And then my best friend, Ben, he went to the Festival Shambhala in 2011 and he came back and just had all this new music to share. And we just started chatting about all this kind of stuff that he discovered. There's artists like Flux Pavilion and Dr. P, Rusko, and all those kind of early originators of the American dubstep sound, carrying it over from the UK sound. And I just loved it. I thought it was that was my window into the modern electronic music scene. And I was still writing my own stuff. I was starting to experiment a little bit now with electronic music at that time. And then in 2012, I go to Shambhala for my first time, and I experienced the Fractal Forest, which it's a stage at Shambhala that focuses on funk and breaks, or at least at that time, that's pretty much all it was. So there was a lot of artists like Feature Cast, A Skills, Sticky Buds that just totally just blew my mind in terms of what you could do with electronic music and bass music and how you could weave different things in there. I guess to start from the beginning, like where my sound came in and how I developed my sound from the very beginning was I took that idea of the funk and the groove, but I wanted to be really different. I wanted to do something that I didn't see being done anywhere. And so I actually jumped into uh, elements of swing and blues. Some of my earliest music, some of my earliest EPs were focused on this blues and this swing, this jazz, and kind of bringing it in. And the main reason is because I just thought it was so unique and it was so different, and I really wanted to stand out in that regard. It was unique, and that ended up being negative in the end because there was nobody else really doing it. There wasn't enough music being generated for me to really have the momentum to keep playing new stuff. It was a very limited, very, very small kind of sound, a very niche sound. I just got to a point where I just realized I was going to hit a ceiling pretty quickly with that, with using the same sample loops and the same elements. Aside from being able to hire like an actual swing band or something like that, it just had its limitations. Around that time, a couple years in, I found artists like Griz and Pretty Lights and Chromatic, and I really got into sort of that funky sound. And I latched on to that movement, and I really directed a lot of my music towards those kind of crowds, that demographic. And so that's why from about 2012 to 16 or so, a lot of that music was definitely geared, and it was derived and inspired directly from those three artists. And something that I haven't really talked a lot about outside of small friend circles and stuff like that is there was a couple opportunities that actually in those years fell through, and it would have been potentially monumental to where I am now. One of them was I had an album that was being lined up with the Pretty Lights label, and I also had an EP in 2018 called Empire that was being lined up with All Good Records, which was Griz's label. And unfortunately, both of those opportunities just didn't end up happening for various reasons. But it would be interesting to know where my career would be now if those two things had happened, just based on the size of those artists and their fan bases and having those opportunities to get in front of those people. Regardless, it didn't happen. And I think because of that, and also because I felt like I was becoming pigeonholed too much into that funk sound, it was in 2018 when I wrote the Empire EP that I fully took it as an opportunity to pivot back into more bass music, like heavy bass centered music. And a lot of people will probably notice that's when my music got a little heavier and a little bit grittier. And that's exactly why, is because I was a little bit disappointed. I was a little bit bitter, and I was a little bit also just excited to be able to just say, okay, I don't need to do that anymore necessarily. I can just switch gears and I can make the music that I want to make. And so I feel like for the last 5 years, I've been trying to break away from that distinct funk sound only. I still have elements of that in what I do, but I've tried to pull away from that as much as I can to say, hey, I do all these other things. I'm interested in all this other kind of music, this bass music, trying to get into that world of the heavier, darker stuff, because that's ultimately what I've been interested in since that point. And yeah.
Yeah, I think you're pulling it off, definitely. And yeah, I absolutely still hear the funk and blues elements to your music. I think you've done a great job infusing the heavier bass into it, weaving back and forth between those sounds. It's funny that you talk about swing, because that I definitely think some of your swing tunes influenced me, and just so it was like, man, I wish there was more of this. And we ended up signing a band called High Step Society, which they do, one of their main sounds is that electro swing. And when I discovered them at Burning Man, and I was like, what is this? This is crazy, crazy. So I think that's such a fun, danceable sound that you don't hear a lot of. And it's such a classic vibe to it. Yeah, that's really crazy about the All Good Records. That's just a really both those things, like, that was where Pretty Lights was winding down and really
Hmm.
having a hard time in his life. And then I know that the All Good Records, that's a pretty gnarly story in the back end of what happened with his label and the other partner that was not one to play ball. So I'm
Yeah,
surprised that that Griz hasn't relaunched a label on his own with so much influence and power, but maybe he just has such a bitter
yeah.
taste and certainly has his plate full.
Yeah, no kidding. I never really got the full story. I just know that there was some behind the scenes
Oh yeah.
unfortunate friction there between
Oh yeah.
how it was run and stuff like that. But yeah, arguably with where Grizz is gone, he could have a majorly successful label by this point
Yeah.
if he wanted to, I think,
Yeah.
right? Obviously,
Yeah. Artist run labels are tricky because the artist, the main artist, let's say Zed's Dead or somebody like that, they have so much influence, they can put somebody on.
yeah.
But what I often see is that they're oftentimes not fully focused on that label. And unless they
Hmm.
have a kick ass label manager, someone running that piece, it can be really hard to get things through and get the attention and kind of put it all
Yeah,
together. I think
yeah,
Closey is doing a fantastic job with her label, and her team is really doing a great job. I would say your home label, Westwood Recordings, Nick and Dunks, I know Nick is more on the label side, but they've done a fantastic job with that label, and I'm so proud of
yeah.
them. Like, how did you guys
They're
meet?
great.
What was that like?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't remember the specific we met. I just know that we ran in the same circles early on before they started Westwood, where, we were both kind of playing the Canadian festivals. They're from the province over BC. And so, yeah, we heard about each other probably through some remixes on SoundCloud. And then we met at a festival eventually and got to chatting and formed a bit of a friendship and ended up playing shows together and saw each other at festivals. And the rest is history. And then yeah, very proud of Nick, who founded Westwood when and did that. It was just super ambitious and always has been. And
Yeah,
yeah, it's just
very
been a massive,
ambitious.
very
Hustling.
ambitious.
It seems like you said, it seems like the fractal forest has been this just fertile ground for them. Like, it feels, I think they even have, doesn't Westwood have compilations just for the fractal forest, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Like
It-
you, Sticky Buds, them, who else plays? I know A Skills, like you mentioned, he's been around forever. But
These
it just seems
skills,
like I look at their roster and it's just like the Shambhala heroes, basically.
yeah, it's just totally captured that sound so well.
Yeah.
There's a few festivals in the UK, I think that you could get a sort of a real taste of that kind of breaks sound. But in terms of over here in America, there's not a lot of festivals that just focus specifically on that kind of sound. You'll catch a set by Big Gigantic or Grizz here and there at a festival, but like the Fractal Forest, that's what it does. That's the thing. That's what you go there for. And it's just so cool. It's cultivated this cult like following of bands that are just absolutely in love with the place. And arguably it's spawned a lot of artists that were inspired by what they saw, just like me,
Mm.
so
You are also a graphic designer and I would say visual artist, in my opinion. You do most or all of your artwork for your albums and music, right?
yeah, I think I've done every single piece of artwork for all my albums. I actually, for this album, for the Voyage, it was the first time that I gave up a little bit of control, at least initially. I hired out an illustrator in South Africa, I believe, because I really liked his style, and I gave him a sketch and had this vision of what I wanted the album cover to look like. And when I got it back, it was really good, but it just didn't feel right. It needed some tweaks and it was just I don't know. So I ended up taking it and just starting from scratch, basically using a little bit of what he had done. And obviously he got paid and all that kind of stuff. But I didn't end up using any of that. I ended up just taking back control anyways. It's the same thing with all the tattoos that I have, like all of this stuff. It's all been, I've designed all of it, told the tattoo artist where to put it. And I don't know. Like I don't know if I'm just afraid to give up the creative control or I'm just waiting for the right person. There was actually one tattoo artist when I was traveling through Bali. He was a fantastic tattoo artist from Greece, and he was a featured resident tattoo artist there in this little place we were staying at. And I said, do whatever you want to do to my calves. And he did this split in half face on each of my calves that is based on the mythology of the Balinese religion. I can't quite recall what it's called, but it's basically like the yin yang or like the angel and the devil. And so it's like these two halves of the face, and he just did a great job. But I think that was like one of the only times where I just sort of gave someone creative control over something that I showcase. Every other piece of artwork that I've done for my music has been something that I've developed, and I don't know. I guess I just like it that way. I just like to be able to follow that vision through and to be able to craft that. It obviously is a lot of extra work that I have to lift that, but yeah, it's been nice to have that consistent visual language, I think, for my brand. And
It's amazing artwork. Gravitas has hired you a couple times to do some artwork. Again, that the band I just mentioned, High Step Society, you just did the single for their Loud Pipes
yes,
cover, and it was like spot on. It's like exactly what I was looking for, and you nailed it. I think in close on the first try and perfect on the second. So
that's all. Thank
where
you.
I think I'm really interested in the intersection between like graphic design and that art and how you think about music. Do you see any overlap? Obviously, they're both creative endeavors, but does any of your work in music help you with your design, or does any of your design work help you with your music? Do you think in does sound apply to color? Does color sound apply to sound or anything like that?
Maybe for some people, it's interesting. I never really thought about that. I feel that they are quite separate from me, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
I think they both tap into the same reservoir creatively, but I think overall I approach them differently. Music writing is just such a full on intensive process that I have to be fully isolated for. And whereas artwork, I can have music on in the background, I can have a show going on in the background, watching Netflix or something like that, and I could just be working away. The artwork that I do, I feel like is a little bit more, what's the word, where you're tranquil and you're zoned in.
You're in the zone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Whereas music, I really have to be in my perfect space, isolated environment with no other sounds going on my laptop, in the studio, or lying in bed writing music or something the environment has to be a lot more specific when I'm writing music. Whereas artwork, I can just pull up anywhere. I could be having a coffee at a cafe and work on that kind of stuff. So the environment's different for sure. I think maybe the process in which it works is a little bit similar too, because I will I build things by trying things out. I'm experimenting constantly. I might not know exactly where it's going to go right at the beginning. I get there by a process of experimenting and trying something and failing and going back and redoing it and bringing other things in and messing with those elements and seeing how that works. Maybe there's a little bit of overlap in terms of how it's actually done, the actual production of it. But yeah, in terms of the mindset, and it's a little bit different. I don't know. First, like writing music is, I feel it's way fucking harder to because you can get a good idea with music. You can get a sweet little 4 or 8 bar loop, but then try to build that into a song. I feel like that's where a lot of songs fall apart is they just don't get there. They don't get to the full song stage. Then you have to factor in the composition, and you have to look for a vocalist, or you have to find the perfect little elements to add in there as the vocal element or the fill or whatever it is, or you have to bring other people into it. So music can be a lot more of a team endeavor, whereas sitting down and drawing or sitting down and doing design is very isolated. It's very just me. It's very personal. So
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I think they work really well together, and I think that very admirable that you've done all of your artwork for all of your music. I think when you look back on your life, you're going to be really proud of that, and it's not a given. It's for us at Gravitas, like we take that really seriously. It's really important to us. It's like it's such a visual world, and when you're talking about music marketing and how the rollout is going to be, and we're going to introduce this idea, and almost every way that people are going to start to interact with music is going to be through that artwork. And then they're going to get that first hint and idea of what they're about to hear through the artwork. And so I think your artwork always does tell the story. It really sits very nicely and in the pocket with the music and gives you that idea.
Throwing a question to you, as someone who runs a label and stuff like that, obviously AI has made a gigantic impact in the art space
Hmm.
and music space. I'm sure it's throwing a wrench in some spokes too, but what's your experience been with AI? Have you used AI to develop some covers, or is it something that being used by a lot of artists to that quick fix? And then I can chat. I think about my experience with it, anyways, and how it's
Yeah, I bet
disrupted.
we're gonna land about on the same idea. It's a good tool for working quickly to work up ideas. I am Part of me is a purist. Part of me is we have the luxury with Gravitas that this is not my full source of income, and that it's really an endeavor for empowering artists, both musically and visually. And so we really want to continue to utilize artists like Seth Graham and the other artists that we've really championed over the years and put money in their pocket, and they've been able to represent us visually. We will iterate and come up with ideas with it and then use that as a way to show people, hey, this is what we're thinking. We did use it for a mix series. We just got Apple curator status. We launched 10 mixes on Apple Music and working with them. And we came up with this idea. I had a mix series called Fresh Cuts, and I did a few mixes, and then I put that, I could just fizzled out. And I was like, why don't we revive that name? It's a fun name. And so as we were like, okay, that's what we'll call it, but what's the idea? What's the visual idea? And I was like, oh, we
Yeah,
could use fruit or this or that. And then someone said Fruit Ninja. And so then I actually went to Midjourney and I did fruits as the ninjas. And it came back, and Midjourney AI art is great for that because it can create these cartoon styles really quickly. And it is ripping other people off for sure. And I think that needs to be acknowledged. Somewhere it got those cartoon characters and shapes, but it's really funny. It's basically these pieces of art with swords and shit, and they're like attacking each other. And
yeah,
it's really cute. It's really fun. And when you look at it, you laugh and you go, oh, wow. And a lot of the art we do is really serious and it's really like, we're gravitas. And it's,
yeah.
let's make it fun. Let's make somebody laugh. So we got really excited about that. So that's really, so I think Savage, just as we're recording this today, just dropped an album EP, and he used Midjourney a good bit for that last piece, but he did still get in there. It's a tool. I
Yeah,
think that anybody that's just going to lean on it 100%, I think we're going to sniff that out. I think we're going to get really pretty good. It is going to keep getting better and better, but I think we're going to get pretty good at seeing it. And
yeah,
you can already usually tell. And
yeah.
I'd much rather hire you, man. And it's not about the money. I'd much rather hire someone like Seth Grimm, who's just dropping these pieces of
Yeah.
gold artwork, and he's really coming from his soul, and you can feel it. And so that's what I love
Great.
about art. That's what I love about music. That's what I want. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah. No, I think I fall pretty much on the same page. I can certainly it is getting much better every month, every week. It gets a little bit better, but I can still tell. I can still tell just things are too overly polished. Things look just a little too emphasized. I think that it is a good tool. I use it. I use it for even for when I'm designing, if I need to cut elements out
Sure.
or expand images and then fill in that space. I use it as a tool. I've used some of the video AI processing in some of my Voyage art. I think it's an opportunity for me to take some of the art I've developed and then to have some evolution cycles that I can
Sure.
maybe use in some visuals for my shows. There's that, which is really cool. But yeah, I think it's a bit of a bubble in the sense that it came on really strong all of a sudden in the last year or so, and
Mm.
everybody was using it. Everybody was doing their profile pictures in AI. Everybody got it. Everybody got really excited about it. I think the hype's going to die down a little bit, and it'll just become like a tool that we're going to use for a lot of things. But we're still going to need people designing art. We're still going to need
Yeah.
art directors, and we're still
Yep.
going to need people behind it all.
Yep.
I am terrified of where AI in general is going to go. I think that it's going to disrupt a lot of shit. Even just like with the workers, the writers strikes and the actor strikes and like what they were attempting to do with actors cloning their likeness and using them as extras. It's like that sort of thing isn't gonna slow down. We're gonna see more uses of AI that are gonna get scarier, more like Black Mirror, I think, because
Hmm.
just the rate at which it's evolving is
Yep.
pretty hard to pretty hard to know where it's going to be in a year or two, but we're just going to have to go along for the ride and hopefully we can work with it and alongside it instead of against it.
Yeah. I think what you're saying about the actors, it's what is the data set? What are you training your model on? And I think there's a real ethical discussion to be had about, did I consent to that? And if you're not, then
Yeah.
it should be excluded. And like all of these people that have already built the models and they've done just use Google or whatever to train their models and nobody had a say, like that needs to be corrected and people need to be compensated in some way, shape, or form. Web3 and all of the NFT and stuff like that is the model that could be used for that. And if you say this model has 0.001% of your intellectual property was built on it, then you should be compensated for it. You can't just take someone's music samples and put it into your song and then call it your own. But that's what they're doing with these models. It's
Yeah.
so complicated that you can't unwind it. You can't put your finger on it. Oh, that riff is mine when that's the
Yeah.
problem. But, and I don't know. Honestly, I don't have enough trust in our government and our freaking, old, they're so old. They don't even understand how the internet works. So tell me about the tubes. And it's, thanks guys.
Yeah.
Good job. You're definitely not going to catch up to AI. So, um,
Yeah. No kidding.
I did want to ask you on this album, you've got a few pretty dope collabs. Wildebeest is someone who's released with Gravitas as well. And then Lily Fangs, who's freaking phenomenal. So how was that coming together? And that's definitely a hit of a tune and a lot of fun there.
Yeah, that one was super fun. I just had this desire to put together this Latin trap song for the longest time. I think there was one direct influence. It was a song by Cardi B,
Nice.
and it has this like old school kind of tango sample in it. That one was, yeah, it was fun. I wanted to get gritty with one of the tracks. And as I started build up the bass of it and had this Latin inspired sample that I found, and then I was like, hold on, Wildebeest, who I've worked with a few times before, done a couple tracks before. I was like, they could easily come in here and we could just totally do a whole new horn line. And then it evolved into having a solo section with a sort of a little tango kind of breakdown. And they did a little solo there and they were so stoked. So it was a great way to bring in that live element into a track. And then just, yeah, Lily is such a talented vocalist and hip hop artist. And we'd actually recorded those vocals for a song a few years earlier. And it just didn't quite feel right on that track. We kept pulling it off. And then I just stored those vocals and then ended up bringing them back for this track. So they weren't actually originally recorded
Wow.
for losing it, but they just fit really well. It was in the same key,
Nice.
same tempo. So just brought those back in and yeah, worked really nicely. Just in general with the collabs that I did for this album, there's a lot of people that I hadn't worked with before. Most of them were new. My aim for this album really was that I really wanted to focus on songwriting for this album. So I did not set out to make an album full of bangers. I wanted to make an album full of songs that, were high energy and would sound good live, but also could do really well in Spotify and songs that you would actually want to replay again and again. So my focus was like equally on songwriting and the composition and sort of the catchiness of the track, as well as it was about having a song I could play in a live set. So that was definitely one of the biggest challenges for me when I was writing this album, is just approaching it that way. Because before I'll make a fun little mashup or something like that, it's mainly to play out live, or I'll make a banger, or it's just focused on the drop and clearly made for live. But yeah, really focusing on getting vocalists now to really create those catchy hooks and to really not settle for okay, but really work with them to make something that is worthy of repeating, like listening to multiple times over and over again on Spotify, and doing well in the streaming world. Had a bit more of a budget for that this time around. There was actually, well, one of the artists or one of the vocalists that I worked with, Taylor Renee. I kind of put out a post. I was like halfway through writing the album, and I put out a post just looking for new people to work with. I was just scouring. Maybe there was some artists that some of my fans might have known that they could suggest or tag. And I don't know if it was that post that directly led her to me or if it was just serendipity, but she emailed me just out of the blue and just sent me some stuff she'd been working on and was excited to work with me. It was actually, she's worked with Ellis Dream and a couple of larger dubstep acts. And and very talented and just had some ideas, sent them over. I sent her this drum and bass track that I'd been writing, and it just fit really well. And that's one of my favorite tracks on the album is Waves. So that's the story of how that one came together. But it was just totally out of the blue, right? Like I didn't even search for that. It just came to me. And so that was really cool. Some of the other collaborators that I worked with, just people that I had heard featured in other songs and reached out and just wanted to see if I could make it happen. And like Lynx and Brewser, they did a great job. I heard them in some Westwood releases and reached out. We were able to link up and get that going. So this album was the first time I've ever done that to scale, or I've worked with that many vocalists. And moving forward, that's, I think, my golden standard really is how I want to work, because vocals for me have just been so important to, like, all of my top tracks on Spotify have a strong vocal lead. And so I've honed in on that as a requirement to move forward and build a lot of my music.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have said it very well, especially in electronic music. There's a difference between a track and a song. And like you were
Mhm.
saying, like songs are you get in your car and you're like, what song do I want to listen to? And 9 times out of 10, it's going to have some sort of vocal that captures the emotion that you're dealing with or wanting or going after.
Yeah.
And it's we're humans. We speak in language and we think in language. And so when that's how we connect with it. And obviously the music is such the root, but it's important. It's a big deal. So I that's super cool to hear you say that. And it is a lot. It's a lot more work. It's a lot harder. You have to you have to find the groove. You have to bounce track back and forth between the vocalist and you, and then collaborate in that way. Collaborations are not easy. They
Mhm.
are, especially if you have a creative vision, like you said, you have a really strong creative vision of what you want. How do you find like the line? And then I've managed a woman named Christina Soto. She's done songs with Tritonal and been remixed by all sorts of people, Seven Lions, and worked with Symbionic and Of the Trees and things like that. And it's like that when we're coming into a relationship with a new artist. Like she did a song with Champagne Drip, and it's negotiating that relationship and how we're going to move forward. Who's going to go first is a big deal. And okay, we're at this point, she's a mom of two and got a career, and it's send me something so that I can write to it. And then in some cases, and I'm not saying this happened with Champagne Drip or anyone else that I mentioned, but then she'll ship it back and then they'll start to change keys or progressions or something. But I wrote to this. Yeah, you can't like remix it already. So it's very complex. Whereas you're in the box, you're in your DAW, it's real easy to start to change things or move things
Yeah.
around. For a vocalist, if you're writing, your lyrics are like to that melody, it's a much different experience. So we found that some producers, they don't have a ton of experience with that. There's a learning curve to working with vocalists. There's a learning curve to the collaboration. There's a learning curve to honoring the contribution by the vocalist or the other co-producer or what. So it sounds like you've got your feet under you on that place. And again, I think that's going to serve you really well. And again, props to the album. Let's dive in on the album
Interesting.
a bit. I think this was your fifth album, but your first in the last 10 years. So that's a big gap. And I guess I'll preface that by saying, like, the world has changed. Most people are now like management, people advocating like singles, singles, singles. Albums tend to, you have to earn that. I think you have as an artist. Most people don't sit down and read a book. Most people don't sit
Yep.
down and listen to an album. They're on their phone scrolling and just super short attention spans. I am an advocate for an album. I'm an advocate for storytelling. I'm an advocate for people taking the time to percolate. I think financially and in terms of Spotify and the numbers and all that game, it's hard, but it's, and as I was reading about the album, it seemed like this was a very personal experience, but also you use a lot of the names are about like blast off or whiplash or these futuristic themes. So I don't know, tell me about like how it came together and some of the themes about it and any of the challenges that you had while you were putting it together.
Mhm. Yeah, so it it had been a lull between albums, and I don't know. I think part of why I wrote it was just it. I wanted to write an album again. It felt like it was time. It felt like enough time had passed. I had enough experience writing under my belt that I felt ready to try something of that size and caliber. But also, yeah, it was surely the pandemic and how monumentally life changing that was for me and everybody else. And I felt like I had to write about it. I also had, like all musicians, a lot of spare time during the pandemic to throw ideas around and try things and to sit on a bunch of new music and stuff like that. Yeah, at a certain point during the pandemic, it was tough. It was tough. We lost our income. We lost our source of work. I had some really good stuff lined up. I had a Red Rock show lined up. I had a tour lined up, and all of that went away. And so there's a point where I was like, I really consider, should I even keep doing this? And luckily I got through it one way or another. I did actually fall back into some of the design work that I do or that I was doing pre being a musician, and just for stability, got a full time with a marketing agency, creative marketing agency doing design and video work. And in my spare time, I was writing music and, playing video games and stuff. And that's pretty much how I got through the second half of the pandemic. But I mean, it was just so rough, especially here in Canada. Canada is a little bit more progressive, I think, than some places in the States. So we stayed locked down quite a bit longer. They shut down the gym, like the one thing that was like my escape on my release. It was just so tough. And so a lot of the music that I was writing was quite intense, quite dark, quite full on. A pandemic just it really shifted the way I think about a lot of things. And on top of that, we had a child, so we had a daughter, which was a huge life change for me, massive life change. Everything changes when you have a kid. So for me, like this album, I really needed to express my feelings about the pandemic and how hard that was, and my experience being isolated and not able to see friends and losing my job. B, it was what I referenced earlier, which was really trying to break away from that sound that I'd been known for a while in my early years, that Pretty Lights, Griz kind of sound. I'd been trying to pull away from that ever since, but this was my opportunity to say, no, I'm changed. I don't want to do that kind of stuff mainly anymore. I want to be known as this now. And so it was my chance to really reestablish myself sonically with a new album. This is the music that I'm excited about. It was the first time, I think ever really, that I wasn't making music for any particular audience. I wasn't like, oh, I need to make music because I'm trying to get in with this crowd. It was just, I want to make some drum and bass, and I want to put a house track in there, and fuck it, let's make Latin trap. And I want to make a Middle Eastern kind of Troy Boy-ish sound song. So it was really just whatever I felt like doing. I just fully went for it. And so it was pretty liberating to be able to do that for this album and just sit down and write exactly what I wanted with no expectations, very, very little sort of oversight telling me what to do. It was really just my vision. And then I also really wanted to make it a concept album. There's a lot of components of it that I thought about when I was writing this album. From the story, which is essentially it's an analogy of the pandemic. It's this traveler that's traveling through space, leaves Earth, leaves everything he knows, is by himself, goes and explores all these different worlds. The different worlds are symbolized by the different songs throughout the album. the beginning of the album, the symbolized blast off of whiplash of leaving, getting blasted off into space. And then the end of the album is about returning home and that reconnection. But also the end of the album is a lot more mellow. There's a lot more melody. And that's because it is that coming back. It's getting back to yourself. It's coming back home. The beginning is all the chaos, right? It's all the chaos. And the middle is I get a little bit deeper with some of the concepts and some of the sounds. And that's just the introspective part of the story. Even the way that I laid out the songs and the intensity of the songs was thought through in terms of the story. And and the naming structure, it's all to do with where you are in that journey. But yeah, I really wanted to focus on that. There were some albums that I grew up listening to that were really cool concept albums. Like when in my metal days, there was albums by Iron Maiden, albums by Mastodon. There's this really cool progressive rock band called Mastodon, and they made an album about Rasputin and this like crazy story arc. The artwork was all about that. So those kinds of things inspired me to really just go full tilt and connect the artwork and the sound of the album and the concept and the naming of the songs. And then on top of it, so there's so many layers, right? You're trying to write music to be streamed and to be listenable and catchy. You're trying to make music that you're going to put into your sets that you're actually going to play most of it, right? It's not just going to be like an album only track. And then you're trying to create music that tells a story and also sonically makes sense in the album. So it took me a long time. I think it was at least a 2-year project. I sat on it for a year before we started releasing this thing. So it's been done for a while, but it took a long time, and it takes a while to get masters back and to fix the masters and then to make the single artwork and then to plan the marketing and plan the rollout. And it is a shit ton of work. We tried to get a couple of grants from the Canadian government. Unfortunately, nothing really came through. It would have really helped out huge just with being able to fund some of this stuff, make fun music videos and stuff. So it's all been grassroots. It's all just been straight what I can afford and what I have left in my bank account to put into this thing. But we got through it. And so I think I'm even more proud that I was able to just build this thing from start to finish. Mostly just with me and a really good team behind me. So
Fuck yes, dude. Honestly, to pull it off as you described with the concept and to have a storyline weaving in there, really the naming of it. I guess what the question that came up for me is, did you identify gaps and then say, okay, I need to go from here to here, and now I'm going to go write this song with this in mind? Was that kind of, you had some key songs and then you wrote around those, or I need to get from point A to point B with these?
yeah. Yeah, actually, because that's actually how I write some of my big sets when I'm playing, like, for instance, my Shambhala set. I figure out a general layout, and then I have little gaps. Like, I need a song that is maybe in one of these two keys that can fit in between there. And then I also need it to be a certain tempo. And yeah, I don't know how many other artists do that, but even with the album, I certainly sat down and I was like, I need a song that can go in between these two songs, or I need a song that can be a good end song, or I need a song that can mellow things out after this one. And yeah, that was a consideration when I was writing, because you write tracks and then you know that certain ones are going to go on the album and certain ones are possibly, there's a lot of things that don't end up going on there. So you're constantly writing and you're like, okay, that sounds cool. That one could be album worthy. Does it fit? Is it a totally left field from the other ones around it? And so just a lot of considerations. Yeah, there was a lot of tracks that just were just ideas and never really went anywhere. Just like there were a lot of vocalists, many vocalists that we worked with that it just never made the cut. It either I never heard back from them again, or they finished something and it didn't feel right. And yeah, as an artist, you definitely experience that where not everything you make makes it. You're throwing things out, you're putting things to the side, you're trying things out, redoing things. And yeah, lots of other components that were made that never made the cut.
I think that's a learned skill, right? And something you have to get better at and deal with the emotional attachment to the time and the energy. And like, I like this, but it doesn't quite make sense now. That's tough. That seems tough.
It is.
That is too bad you guys didn't get grants. I mean, in America, I don't even know if there's anything like that available. I know in Australia and France, like for instance, Little Fish is someone that releases with us. He has another band and they are like on a French stipend. Like they all live
Mm.
off, they have to play 42 shows a year, but
Oh,
then
wow.
they get a stipend. And I know when Closey was first coming to the US, there was some amount of money that was coming from the French government to help her tour. And it's good luck doing anything like that from the United States. But I think remember at one
Yeah.
point, someone in the Westwood family it might have been you or it might have been someone else. I heard they were like, yeah, they got like a pretty good chunk of money from the Canadian government for something. I was like, really? Oh, wow. That's dope. So maybe next time, but you did it, man. That's amazing. I would absolutely love to see a music video of Blast Off or Whiplash or something like that. It would be super cool.
Yeah, actually, we are working on a video for Whiplash
Nice.
currently. We're doing it, like I said, we're doing it a little bit grassroots, but there's a very talented animator with Westwood that is putting it together, and I'm doing some of the sort of the overall art direction. And we're working with Links, and I think she's going to do some filming, and so we're going to put it all together. And yeah, that's in progress. We'll see how that turns out. And I'm really
Awesome.
excited
Good
that
luck. Those
we
are,
can
yeah,
release both.
videos so hard. It is probably what I would say the most unforgiving format. Like you have
Yeah,
to nail everything. Luckily, you've got the
yeah.
audio, but it's color grading and getting consistent shots and what frame per second are we at? Oh, this doesn't match. This is the wrong format. We got to go reshoot this thing. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, no.
It's a lot. Yeah,
uh,
it's just a lot of components for sure.
nice. Yeah, last but not least, I really wanted to ask you about being a new father. Do you want to expand on that idea? Like what has the shift been for you? What I've heard from some people is it brings everything into focus and clarity, and you're forced to be maybe more efficient with your time. What changes? Like you said, everything changes when you become a parent. What are some of the biggest takeaways from you or experience?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. It does bring things into focus. You have a lot less time in your day, so you almost are forced to be more productive when you finally do sit down and jump in the studio. So I'm a lot better now when I do get time in the studio. I'm a lot better at either killing an idea or moving forward with something that eventually becomes a song. So I've noticed that. I've noticed that I have a lot less songs that I work on for a while and they never go anywhere. I'll just get rid of an idea if it doesn't seem to be working because I just don't have the time to. I don't think I've had a 5 or 8 hour stretch in the studio since my daughter was born, and I used to do that all the time when I was doing full time. I would spend all afternoon in the studio. I'd just be writing music, and I don't know, maybe having that much time makes you kind of productive somehow. You're
Yeah.
just doing a little bit of work here and there, but you're never really getting anywhere. So yeah, definitely a lot more focused. Yeah, you get less sleep. Everything becomes a little more challenging. There's just being spontaneous kind of goes out the window when you're a parent. So you trying to meet up with friends, you have to book 3 or 4 weeks in advance. And even then, if your kid has a bad morning or misses a nap, you could still throw your plans out the window. So it's challenging. It is by far and away the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And I think a lot of parents would probably agree. It like life is full of challenges before having kids, but it totally makes you appreciate the time you had before, and you almost take it for granted how easy and how in control you can be of your time, everything you do. Because once you have a kid, suddenly all that free time, it has to be devoted to making sure that kid stays alive, is eating, is
Yeah.
getting calories, is not putting rocks in their mouth, especially when they become a toddler. Now they're opening drawers, they're interested in picking up sharp knives, you have to put baby gates up so they don't run down the stairs and they don't eat
Yeah.
rocks, and they're picky with food. So you have to make sure that they eat, and then they go on hunger strikes, and you got to figure out what they want all the time. So it's super high stress. There's a saying that it basically says if parenting feels hard, it means you're doing it well.
Mm.
And I think the idea behind that is it feels hard because you're always there for them, and you're putting in the effort, and you're being a good parent because you are spending a lot of time with them and you care about them, right? And that's hard. It is a full new set of responsibilities, but it really does it really does change the way that you look at life. Now all of a sudden I'm focused on stability, and the future has a face. The future has a face, and that's the face of my daughter. And so everything you do has to be done with that in mind of like setting them up in the future, making sure that your family's going to be okay. Like I can't just go play a gig and then spend 3 days kicking around on the promoter's couch hanging out. I come home right away and I got to be there for my family. It's a lot different, and especially with festivals. I play the show. I don't drink much these days, and either I might have the odd beer or maybe the odd glass of wine or something like that. But I'm super sober. I try to stay athletic and try to get some gym time in when I can. And I think that's super helpful when you're on the road a lot. It's something that I wish I would have done a lot more when I was really touring, but something that can get away from you when you're constantly traveling and drinking and around partying is just like the health aspect of it. But yeah, man, being a parent is just it's a roller coaster. Somebody said you'll have the best and the worst moments of your life with your kids because it could just be so challenging and so frustrating, but also so rewarding and just fulfilling at the same time, right? So there's a constant balance every day between those two things. And yeah, where my music fits in there has definitely changed. Actually, one interesting point is that I feel the pressure has been taken off a little bit on the music front because I do still work in design, and so the financial pressure has been taken off of the sink or swim kind of thing. And I noticed that when I was full-time musician, the sink or swim aspect really was affecting me mentally. It was affecting the way I was writing because when I started writing music, it was because I needed an outlet and it was something fun that I could push my energy into that on the weekends and write some fun music. And then you go full time with it and suddenly that's your income. You have to write. Now you have to produce and you have to keep coming up with new ideas. Okay, when's the new album coming out? When's the new EP coming out? What label are you now looking at? There's that constant sort of pressure, right? And that can really mess with how you write. And so now that I've taken a bit of that pressure off, I can actually have fun with it a little bit again. And I look forward to sitting down and writing. I look forward to going and making music on the plane on the way to the show because it's like a release for me again. It's almost like a vacation for me again. It's got that renewed excitement about it that I had when I started. So I think that's something that a lot of artists probably don't talk about a lot is it does become a job when you go full time with it. And anything that is a job will become a bit of a drag at some point. You have to do things a certain way and there's a certain output you're expected to have, especially nowadays, to stay relevant. Crazy.
I love that. I was going to say, I think when people are early on in their career, that's the dream, right? Or the hope. And maybe you make it so big that it's a little easier, but I
Yeah.
don't know that it ever gets easier at that level. It's just more stress and more things, less music making and more just like dealing with other aspects of the career. And it's cool that you've been able to take a step back from that and just get reconnected to the fun of it. And also I think sounds like with the pandemic and with having a kid, there's this new appreciation for just the love of doing it. And now you have this freedom, which just sounds so refreshing. Hey, I'm just going to do what makes me happy inside of this. And you have your security and you're looking after your family in that way. So that's
Yeah.
beautiful, man. That is balance and that is finding your own way. That's finding your own path inside all of that, which is not easy. There's so many societal expectations or expectations that we put on myself. And we get attached to this idea, I want to be a big time musician or I want to do this. And then as our lives unfold, you have to evaluate what's important to yourself and say, you know
Yeah.
what, I don't, that even when I had it, when I was full time, I wasn't my happiest. I
Yeah.
wasn't the most balanced. I wasn't able to take care of my body. I wasn't these things, these challenges. So it sounds like you found a really good, happy medium and to me, putting out some of the best work of your life. So, man,
Cheers. Thank you.
bravo,
Thanks.
brother. Man, anything else going on? What are you excited about? What's coming up next? I know you got a few more tour dates and maybe by the time this comes out, those might have been wrapped, but what else you got going on? Anything else you're excited about?
Yeah, like you said, these tour dates, really getting to play out the album finally for the fans
Mm.
in its entirety, essentially. Most of the songs on the album are getting playtime during these shows. So that's really good. Getting into new markets, getting in front of new fans again always feels good. And just, yeah, just writing writing new music. Like I mentioned, the album was done a little while ago. We sat on it for a little while with marketing and mastering and stuff like that. So in that time, I've started to write other music and there's some new stuff that I'm excited about. And I think it's just, it feels like the pandemic and this new album is sort of me opening a new chapter. And so now I get to write that chapter, which is really cool. There's shows that are being planned and there's some collabs and releases that are in the beginning stages. But I think just feels like a new world for me now that I've got my grounds now that my daughter's 2. It's a little easier. It's definitely still quite hard to find a lot of studio time that I had before, but it's getting easier. But the biggest thing is though that I've found my grounding. I've gotten to a bit of a rhythm. And so moving forward, just writing new music, looking forward to pushing that music. I really want to try to push that music into new demographics, really push into the bass scene a little bit. Just seeing some of the festivals that are, popping up and blowing up, getting onto some of those circuits and those stages and getting into that world a little bit. I think that I've certainly done the funk thing for a long time, and I'll always probably have some elements of that, but just exploring even just some artists that I'm, hoping to collaborate with and stuff like that. Just getting into new grounds and exploring new territory, and just exploring a bit of the EDM world that way. Yeah, writing music, new shows, hopefully some exciting festival opportunities and maybe some supports on tours and stuff like that in the future. Really, it's an open book at this point. I'm just excited for the creative side of it to really just make music that I want to make and not have a lot of expectations from people to write a certain way. I feel like I've always pushed it a little bit. I've always tried to build some variety in my music discography. I've always tried to throw some curveballs in there, and that has allowed me to go into these different directions without too much pushback, I think, from fans, which is nice because you see some artists that try to take a bit of a turn, like Getter or Griz to a certain degree, and they get a lot of their kind of old school fans pushing back and
That's true.
saying some things. But if you've cultivated a bit of variety for your whole discography, I think there's a little bit more freedom to be able to move around within that sphere. But
Love it.
yeah, I think those are things I'm excited about. Obviously, being a father is exciting and seeing where that goes. I'm able to have conversations with my daughter now. She's starting to really chat, having that as an element and maybe bringing her out to shows in the future. See, it seems like she's already into house music and dancing and stuff like that, which is super cute. She starts grooving to house music whenever we play it. Yeah, I think that like a perfect spot is to be able to bring my family out to some shows and some festivals in the future and like bringing them into that world as I'm traveling around and just really find that balance. And yeah, the hope is always there that I can get to a higher place in the scene and really push my brand to where I've always wanted to go. But at the same time, I've also come to accept that if that never happens, even if I just make the music I want to make and keep slowly growing and keep playing some fun festivals and stuff, and I think I would be happy with that. I've come to accept that that level of success doesn't happen for everybody. I'm hoping that I still have some room to grow into that. And maybe I'll get lucky with a release. Maybe I'll get lucky with just the right person at the right time. But the cold reality of the music scene is that like 10% of people, if you're lucky, probably make it.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, it's tough, right? It's just, you might have some moments, but it's really hard for a lot of people in the scene to really see success. And if you can get to a spot where you're making income that you need to make and you're happy doing it and it seems to be well balanced, and I maybe that is success. I don't know.
I think it is. I think there's 1,000 true fans, the saying or the article about that. That is, to me, that's success. The fact that you've toured and you released these albums and you've done it full time. And there's only more that you can do with that and have more fun with it. But yeah, I think you hit on it too, is like the stress that comes along with trying to play the game can be really detrimental to your creative output and so it's beautiful when it all connects, but it is rare, right time, right place, right sound, right artist, right time in your life, like all of these things.
Yeah.
Going back to that Griz moment, the all good moment, who knows? But I say from a fan to you, like you've stood out to me as someone who's truly you, doing you, producing at an absolute high level. Your music makes people dance, it gets funky. and pulling from all these different, like you said, the blues and the funk and the soul and the vibes, and then still being a modern, really well produced electronic music and doing that in a way that recontextualizes it. Be like, wow, I didn't know it could be like that. That's success to me, man.
Cheers.
But yeah, man.
Appreciate
Thank you
that.
for coming on today. Thank you for being on the podcast. And any last words?
No, I just so stoked to be able to have a conversation with you and just chat about things that I don't normally get to chat about. So
Yeah.
it's always nice to, yeah, to express and to dive deeper into some stories and stuff like that. So it's been a pleasure, and I'm super stoked with everything that you've been doing with the label and all the artists that you worked with, and the fact that you're still doing it strong. And
Yeah.
it's inspiring for sure. It's very inspiring. Yeah,
Thank you, man. Thank you. Much love, bud. Good luck with your daughter. Good luck with all the music. Can't wait to hear what you got next. Hopefully, we'll be in Austin soon. I'd love to sit down and share a meal or a beer and see you again soon, brother. Thanks again.
absolutely. Yeah, we'll see you soon. Talk